I was raised in church. We went every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Any other time the doors were open. If there'd been Saturday night, we would have been there. I'm grateful for the heritage of faith and the relationship with Jesus that my parents modeled. I learned to pray and worship and give and serve and follow by watching their example. I've always loved church. I'm still here every chance I get. That's the way it used to be. Religious beliefs were handed down from your parents. If your mom and dad were Methodists, you would be a Methodist for life. If your grandparents were Lutheran, your parents were Lutheran, you were Lutheran, and your kids would be Lutherans. If your background was Pentecostal, you'd always be Pentecostal. If your family was Assembly of God, you'd be Assembly of God. Your Catholic family would be Catholic for generations. You weren't Catholic or Methodist or Lutheran or Assembly of God because you chose to be. You just never considered anything else. That's all you knew. And that used to be true. But it's not really that way anymore. Now in ever increasing amounts, people are trying out different religions in their search for God. And you can find websites about angels, meditation, witchcraft, magic, every religion under the sun, and some religions that worship the sun. People are exploring spirituality like never before. By the way, just an aside, be cautious when you explore spiritual questions on the internet. I've seen so many otherwise smart people led astray by websites that twist truth, make up credentials, and ignore any academic standards. Just because someone sounds smart doesn't mean they are smart. Just because it's on the web doesn't mean it's true. And even if it sounds like the truth, it might not be the truth. You can find people against anything imaginable. You can find people who are for crazy things. Some people just post their foolishness to see if they can get other people to believe. Be aware. Don't be fooled. If you're not sure, ask us. We'll be glad to tell you. Well, one of the challenges to all those religious systems being taught is a tendency to put too much emphasis on yourself. Every religious system other than Christianity teaches you that you have to attain a certain level of good works or accomplishments in order to go to paradise or go to heaven. It's about you. If you accomplish enough good, you'll go to heaven. If you don't do enough, you're not allowed to go to heaven. What you do determines where you go. Now, how much is enough? Nobody knows. But one thing's for sure, it's all up to you. We don't do it on purpose, but we take cues from other religions and all the emphasis on self, and very subtly, unintentionally, we apply it to our belief system. It's all about you. What have you done? What have you said? How much faith do you have? If you haven't been healed, it's because you don't have enough faith. If you haven't received a financial miracle, it's because you haven't given enough or you haven't done enough to qualify. Good-hearted people say things like, well, if you have this sickness, it's your fault. You need to examine your life. You must be doing something wrong. Or, you wouldn't need to have knee surgery if you just had enough faith. I remember a lady telling one of our seniors that, and it devastated her to think that she was somehow responsible for her own knee problems. 6 months later, the lady who told her that had her own knee surgery. Say you're healed, you'll be healed. Don't admit you're sick, you won't be sick. Just have more faith. Is that really true? Does your healing or your miracle depend on what you say and what you do? What's God's role? And just how good do you have to be in order to be healed or blessed or receive a miracle? We've been taught to think it's a formula, that if you can just get to the right faith healer, if you can say the right prayer or give the right offering or go to the right church or have the right amount of faith, if you can figure out the formula, God will heal you. You've got to have the miracle formula. And we search for a formula because we're Americans. We believe anything can be accomplished if we work hard enough, if we figure out the answer. Everything has a formula. I even read a book that taught the right way to pray for any and every physical problem. Where to place your hands on someone and what to say in prayer. And according to the author, if you don't pray the right way, it won't work. And I could just picture God in heaven saying, "Oh, I wanted to heal you, but you were supposed to put your hand on her shoulder, not on her forehead. Sorry." I mean, it's almost keep trying, maybe you'll figure out it and get it. Now, I want to tackle a difficult theological question, and I'm going to do my best to tackle that in an easy to understand way. When it comes to a miracle, when it comes to healing in your life, how much is up to you? How much is up to God? We're going to do that by looking at two stories in the New Testament. Two men, both in desperate situations. Their only hope was a miracle from Jesus. Now, these two guys had some similarities, but they were really completely different. And by studying their stories and Jesus' reactions side by side, you'll discover some important things about miracles. And I hope to relieve some pressure. Mark 10 tells the story of Bartimaeus, a blind man who was desperate to see. In John chapter 5, we find the story of an invalid, a man who couldn't move and was desperate to walk. The first similarity, both men had a need. One was blind, the other couldn't walk. Different needs, but both had a need. Now, it's important that you understand the culture in Bible times. If you were handicapped, you were considered a worthless drain on society, subhuman. People avoided the handicap. People ignored the handicap. Your handicap was viewed as a result of your sin. You couldn't walk or you couldn't see because God was punishing you for your sin. In this case, both men had a need. Both men also had a plan. Now, Bartimaeus' plan was simple. He stood by the road, and when Jesus came by, Bartimaeus planned to shout out and ask for healing. The invalid's plan was a little more complex. He staked out a small pond called the Pool of Bethesda. It was a crowded gathering place for people with all kinds of illnesses, and people believed that every once in a while an angel would come and would stir up the water, and that the first person to jump in, first person that hit the water would be healed. So when the water began to move in a mysterious way, there was a race to the pool. The invalid's plan was to jump in the pool at the first ripple. There's just one slight flaw in his plan. He couldn't walk. He couldn't run to the pool. He couldn't jump in the water. So he really didn't have much of a plan. As Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, here's where we see Bartimaeus sitting beside the road begging. He couldn't go out and get a job, but he had some initiative. He was on the side of the road asking for money. Every day he got up early to go get one of the best spots, and he spent his whole day begging, shaking his cup, hoping someone would have pity on him and give him a few small coins. Wasn't much. At least he's doing something. The invalid, on the other hand, was doing absolutely nothing. He wasn't even begging. He was lying on a mat by the pool day after day. He couldn't get up and run. He couldn't jump in the water. This is a picture of a guy wallowing in self-pity. I can't run. I can't walk. I'll just lay here till I die. It's the first big difference between them. Bartimaeus was doing everything he could. The invalid was doing absolutely nothing. So who are you like? Are you doing everything you know to do, or are you like the invalid? Feeling sorry for yourself, just hoping that one day you'll get a lucky break. Have you ever heard the Bible verse, God helps those who help themselves? Ever heard that verse? What a great verse. There's just one problem with that verse. It's not in the Bible. And it's only partly true. It's true. God does help those who help themselves. God also helps people who can't help themselves. Back to Bartimaeus. When he heard it was Jesus of Nazareth coming, he began to shout, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Many rebuked him, told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus always drew a crowd. And this was a chance to make serious money. There's a lot of people. But Bartimaeus was more focused on Jesus than his earning opportunity. He completely focused Jesus. He kept yelling out his name. He ignored the crowd that was trying to make him be quiet. He ignored the obstacles, and he kept his focus on Jesus. The invalid, on the other hand, when Jesus saw him lying there, learned he'd been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, do you want to get well? Sir, the invalid replied, I have no one to help me in the pool when the water's stirring. Well, I'm trying to get in, and who knows how he's trying to get in. Someone else goes down ahead of me. I always lose. Life is tough. I'm going to go eat some worms. When Jesus arrived, the invalid didn't even recognize him. He just continued his pity party. All the reasons why he wouldn't get better. Someone's always faster. No one's here to throw me in the water. This helpless man's world was confined to a tiny mat on the stones beside the pool. It's the second difference. Bartimaeus was Jesus focused. The invalid was excuse focused. So which are you like? Are you focused on Jesus, or are you focused on your problems and your excuses, all the reasons you're not happy? Jesus heard Bartimaeus yelling, and so Jesus stopped and said, call him. So they called to the blind man, cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you. Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and he came to Jesus. Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? And the blind man said, Rabbi, I want to see. He was full of hope. When Jesus asked what he needed, think of his list. He could ask for money. He could ask for a prime begging spot. He could ask for a new job. Instead, Bartimaeus went for the whole thing. Jesus said, what do you want? He said, I want to see. The invalid? Jesus asked him, do you want to get well? He said, sir, I have no one to help me in the water. Well, I'm trying to get in. Someone gets ahead of me. Jesus didn't ask him that. Jesus said, do you want to get well? He could have said, absolutely, I want to walk. But he'd just given up. We don't know exactly why he was at the pool. We do know he's been an invalid for 38 years. For almost 4 decades, he had seen through the eyes of hopelessness, waiting for a healing that didn't come. He no longer believed healing was possible. He was an excuse-making, no-chance-taking, hopeless case. Big difference. Bartimaeus was hopeful. The invalid was hopeless. So how about you? Are you filled with hope? Or are you hopeless? Back to Bartimaeus. Jesus called Bartimaeus. Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. When Jesus called, Bartimaeus followed the sound of his voice. Can you imagine how hard that would be? Followed the sound of his voice, and he pushed through people to get to Jesus. The invalid couldn't come to Jesus because he wasn't physically able. So Jesus, in all his mercy, went to the invalid. Isn't that an awesome thought? That man couldn't approach Jesus, so Jesus approached him. He walked up in the middle of the invalid's sorrow and despair. What a difference. Bartimaeus came to Jesus. Jesus came to the invalid. And in spite of all their differences, one real big similarity, both men had an encounter with Jesus. Jesus stopped for both of them, for Bartimaeus, who was filled with hope, and for the invalid, who had no hope. Something happens when you get near Jesus. The blind man shouted, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And when Jesus came to him and said, what do you want? He said, I want to see. Somehow, Bartimaeus knew who Jesus was. He addressed Jesus as Son of David. That's a term that meant Messiah. Jesus had spoken around the area where Bartimaeus lived. On one of those occasions, Bartimaeus must have been on the edge of the crowd and heard life-giving words. And Bartimaeus listened better than other people. He was blind, and so listening was his only way to learn. And apparently, sometime along the way, Bartimaeus made the decision that Jesus was more than a man. He was the Son of God. Bartimaeus was a faith-filled believer. The invalid apparently wasn't a believer, a follower, or even a casual observer. Jesus was the most famous teacher of the day. Jesus was a figure who inspired controversy everywhere he went. But this guy sitting by the pool had never even heard of him. How do we know that? He called him Sir. And as you'll see in a moment, he really didn't know who it was. Can you imagine? All those sick people sitting around a pool, watching the water, waiting for something to stir the water, a gust of wind, who knows, waiting for healing, not knowing that the healer himself was on the scene. This invalid couldn't have been a believer, or he would have known who Jesus was. So, if he was not a believer, there's no way he could be healed, right? Because if he didn't believe in Jesus, how could he do his part? How could he have any faith? What a huge difference. Bartimaeus was a believer. The invalid didn't even ask who Jesus was. When Jesus said to Bartimaeus, "What do you want me to do for you?" Bartimaeus said, "Rabbi, I want to see." No hesitation, no doubt. I want to see. When Jesus came to Bartimaeus, Bartimaeus was primed, ready to receive. But when Jesus came to the invalid and asked, "Do you want to get well?" What's the name of that dog in the cartoons that's always sad? I don't remember that dog's name. It's just always, "Sir," the invalid replied. "Oh, it's Eeyore." "Yeah, that's not a dog. What is he?" "Well, sorry. Apparently we need to have a Winnie the Pooh night." You don't have to be angry about it. Okay. So Eeyore, we're going to name the invalid Eeyore. "I have no one to help me when the water's stirred. While I'm trying to get in, somebody else goes ahead of me. Where's Christopher Robin?" The invalid didn't even know. Was that the right name, by the way? Christopher Robin? Yeah. The invalid didn't even know what he needed. He didn't ask to be healed. He was just looking for someone committed enough to stay with him and chunk him in the water. What if that didn't work? This guy couldn't walk, he couldn't move, and the plan was, I hope somebody will throw me in a pool? Maybe he thought Jesus would hang around till the water was stirred and throw him in. The invalid was looking for natural answers when the supernatural answer was right in front of him. It's a significant difference. Bartimaeus knew what he wanted, healing. The invalid didn't even know what he needed. And comparing the two stories, we kind of root for Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus deserves to be healed, right? We're kind of apathetic towards Eeyore. It's kind of like, okay, do something. But both men had an encounter with Jesus, and surprisingly, both men received a miracle. Now, for some of you, everything you've believed about miracles and healing is about to be challenged. So I want you to listen close and not walk out till I'm done. Look what happened next. First Bartimaeus. Jesus said, Mark 10:52, "Go, your faith has healed you." See what he said? Bartimaeus was healed. Why? Because of his faith. That must be the key, the secret. So if you want to be healed, you have to have great faith. So it is up to you. It's true. God helps those who help themselves. The invalid What was Jesus' response to all that sadness? Jesus said, think about it. The guy said, I have no one to throw me in the water. And Jesus' response to that was, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And once again, the Bible leaves out details. At once, the man was cured. He picked up his mat and he walked. Now, wait a minute. If the formula is faith, why in the world did that guy get healed? He didn't have any faith. Nothing he did brought about his healing. He didn't even know who Jesus was. When Jesus offered healing, he wanted someone to throw him in the water. I'm surprised this guy didn't say, when Jesus said, take up your mat and walk, forget about it. I'm pretty comfortable here. This is a good mat. I don't want to lose my spot. How was he healed? Bartimaeus was healed because of his faith. The invalid wasn't healed because of his faith, but because of Jesus' compassion. Jesus said to Bartimaeus, go, your faith has healed you. Bartimaeus was a believer before he was healed. Bartimaeus' faith was the key to his healing. The invalid was not a believer before his healing at all. In fact, he didn't become a believer until sometime after his healing. His faith came as a result of his miracle. Now, this will mess with some of your theology. If you've always believed that healing was the result of faith, how in the world do you explain this? There's only one possible explanation: the love of God. God, in his love and in his mercy, chose to reveal himself to this invalid by healing his sickness. Bartimaeus was healed because of his faith in Jesus. The invalid had faith in Jesus because he was healed. I think of people who struggle with depression. It's pretty rare that you find somebody fighting depression and at the same time filled with faith. Thank God that it's not about me, what I say, what I pray, what I do. He's God. I'm not. Now let me caution you with a balance point, because you could listen to that and say, Pastor Rod does not believe in faith. He doesn't think faith makes a difference. Pastor Rod is anti-faith. If you say that, you're twisting my words and you're misrepresenting the truth. I am faith-filled. I believe in an all-powerful God who can do far beyond what we can ask or think or imagine. And Scripture's clear. Faith is necessary for the follower of Jesus. Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith it's impossible to please God. Because anyone who comes to him must believe he exists. That requires faith. And that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. So I believe in faith. At the same time, I'm so thankful that when my faith is weak, God is still able to heal. His miraculous power is not limited by your mood. What happens next is amazing. Bartimaeus did what we expect. He left his beggar tools behind. He followed Jesus. The man who restored his sight was worthy of following. But look at the invalid. The day on which this took place was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who'd been healed, it's the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat. But he replied, the man who made me well said to me, pick up your mat and walk. So they asked, who is this fellow that told you to pick up and walk? The man who was healed had no idea who it was. For Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Now, come on. Put yourself in the invalid's place. You haven't been able to walk for 38 years. You lost all hope. You never have a chance to walk again. And then one day, a man walks up and with a word heals you. Would you lose track of that guy in the crowd? You'd hang on. That guy couldn't get away from you. You'd grab on with everything you had, and you would follow him the rest of your life. Not this guy. Many people, even though they've been touched by God and have experienced his love and power, lose sight of him in their crowded, busy lives, just like the invalid. And so what you think should happen next is, and when the invalid didn't acknowledge Jesus, he fell to the ground and God made him crippled again. Would have been fair, right? But not Jesus. Jesus, the Son of God, filled with incredible love, a love we can't even imagine, went to find the invalid again. And we find it in chapter 10, verse 14. Jesus found him at the temple, and he said to him, "See, you're well again. Stop sinning or something worse may happen." The man went away. Now he knew. And he told the Jews it was Jesus that made him well. And Jesus' comment lets us know Jesus wasn't just concerned about his physical condition, but also his spiritual condition. Simply put, 38 years as an invalid was nothing compared to an eternity in hell. Jesus' point was clear. Sin has consequences far worse than any sickness. Both Bartimaeus and the invalid had the opportunity to become followers of Jesus. Bartimaeus chose to follow. We really don't know what decision the invalid made, but it appears he also became a follower because he returned to the Jews who hated Jesus, and he proclaimed Jesus as the one who healed him. He didn't have to go back. He didn't have to testify, but he became a witness to the power of Jesus. And what a powerful similarity. Both men had a Savior. So what's the miracle formula? Who does God help? God helps two categories of people. God helps people like Bartimaeus who help themselves. God also helps those who can't help themselves, like the invalid. See, it's not about you. It's about him. It's not about the words you say, who prays for you, where you're prayed for, the faith you feel, the things you do. That's all wonderful and good, but it's not about you. It's not about finding a miracle formula. It's about finding Jesus, who loves you beyond all love. The lesson from Bartimaeus is run to Jesus. People may try to discourage you. It may seem like you don't have much hope, but run to Jesus. When hope is gone, when doctors don't have an answer, when you don't know where to turn, run to Jesus. And when you run to Jesus, he is there and ready to save and deliver and forgive and heal. Don't let anything stop you from coming to Jesus. The lesson from the invalid, 38 years had passed. He was convinced things would never get any better, but he just had to live with that. You know how that feels when you've just fought something and now you just figure it's just yours. Now I just have to figure out how to manage it. This is never going to change. This is always going to be a part of me. I got to learn a strategy. 38 years. He didn't deserve to be healed. He didn't exhibit faith to warrant a response. He didn't even know who Jesus was. But in this case, rather than help those who help themselves, Jesus helped a helpless man. When everything around you fails, when friends or family aren't around to give you what you need, when your cries for help and your prayers feel like they're bouncing off the ceiling, God's mercy steps in. Mercy can't be forced on someone. Jesus didn't walk up to the man and say, "Look at me. You're going to be healed whether you like it or not." Jesus didn't force it. Jesus simply asked him, "Do you want to be made well?" God never forces his mercy on you. It has to be received. What is it that attracts God's mercy? Mercy is God's response to misery. Maybe you feel like you've been abandoned and all outside help has vanished. You've tried everything you can think of, but nothing works. Look at me, listen to me. You are a perfect candidate for the mercy of God. When we are helpless and hopeless, God reaches out in mercy. The lesson from the invalid, mercy is available for you. You can receive a miracle if you have a lot of faith or no faith at all. You can receive a miracle if you're hopeless or hopeful. You are qualified for a miracle if you're convinced or if you're a doubter. Because it's not about you. It's not a formula. It's God's power. It's God's mercy at work. Today can be your day for a miracle. If you believe this story, and I do, these two stories, then do you know what you should do when you know we're praying for people who need to be healed? You should bring your friends who don't believe in Jesus. You should bring your sick friends who don't know Jesus and say, come on, come to Jesus with me. Say, Pastor Rod, that doesn't make sense. That can't work. It's not because of you. It's because of him. Tonight, if you have zero faith, God can still heal you. If you're here and you're not even sure you believe in Jesus, you came because somebody else brought you, God can still give you a miracle. Your lack of belief doesn't limit the power of God. And if you're faith-filled and expecting, you can receive a miracle. That's a wonderful. I want to be faith-filled and expecting. When your faith is strong, when your faith is weak, he's able. Would you bow your heads? God, I thank you that it's not up to me. Because if it's up to me, I've already given up. If it's up to me, I'd have to try to figure out how much was enough. God, thank you that your power is not defined by what I say or what I do. And God, we pray tonight for miracles. Lord, for people who are faith-filled, I pray you'd touch and heal them. I pray you'd provide the financial miracle they need. I pray that you'd put their family back together. I pray that you would provide the job. I pray you'd heal a broken heart. I pray you'd set them free from depression. Pray you'd do that tonight for people who are faith-filled. Lord, for people who've given up and just aren't sure anymore. I pray that you would touch and heal them. I pray, God, that you would give them a financial miracle, that you would provide the job they need, that you would put their family back together. Not because of them, but because of you. And our trust and our faith is not in ourselves. It's in you and only you. Lord, I pray tonight that you would touch people who need a miracle.